So here we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator at a very rainy Barton Aerodrome in the UK. That is Echo Golf Charlie Bravo if you want to visit that airport yourself. And very pretty it is too. To look at a brand new release for Microsoft Flight Simulator from prolific developer Aeroplane Heaven. And that's the airplane that you see in front of you, which is the very lovely vintage Cessna 140. Now, first a little bit about the developer. If you're familiar with flight simulators, I'm sure you'll have heard of Aeroplane Heaven. If you're not familiar with them too much, Aeroplane Heaven have been going for years, well over 20 years, and in that time they've made about 60 or 70 add-on aeroplanes for various flight simulators. They've made stuff for other developers and other publishing companies and what have you, so they're very, very experienced in making stuff. However, this is their first release for the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. It wasn't originally slated to be their first release. They made a Supermarine Spitfire Mark 1. However, because there is another Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9 available for Microsoft Flight Simulator, that's from Flying Iron Simulations, and it is reviewed on this channel if you want to check that out. Because that was already available, what they decided to do was hold off on releasing their own Spitfire for a little while, because they thought, two Spitfires coming out at the same time might damage sales, even though theirs is a Mark 1 and the one that's available is a Mark 9, and anyone who knows anything about Spitfires knows that they are very different Spitfires. However, to a lot of people, a Spitfire's a Spitfire, so you can kind of understand their decision, which means that this is their first release for Microsoft Flight Simulator, the Cessna 140. Now, before we talk about the real aeroplane, let's talk about what you get in the package. So I'll put a link in the description below of where you can get hold of this thing, which is from the Just Flight website. And if you go there and you pay full price for it, if you're not using any of your loyalty discounts from Just Flight, then this thing will cost you £19 sterling, which if you're paying dollars or euros or what have you, would be kind of an equivalent price to that, so you can work it out off that by doing a search on the conversion. And for that, you get a PDF manual with 5 pages, which is very short and concise, but explains everything about how to fly the aeroplane, because it's not complicated, and explains how all the switches and avionics work and stuff like that. So that's good. You get about 7 paint jobs for the thing, but those 7 paint jobs are applied to 3 different versions of the Cessna 140. So I guess technically you end up with about 20 odd different aeroplanes if you include all the paint jobs and the different variants. The variants are not massively different, but they just give you a little bit of variety. So this is one of the variants. It is a bog standard Cessna 140 as it would have rolled out of the factory. But what owners of the Cessna 140 and other airplanes that are like it would sometimes do is they would sometimes remove the wheel spats from their airplanes so that they didn't clog up with grass and jam up the wheel brakes. So you get a version depicting the wheel fairings having been removed. In terms of what that does to performance, I think it would probably make a difference of about maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour. So it's not a significant difference when you remove those fairings off a plane like this, but it does slightly affect the speed. Now, the other version that you get, because I said that there are 3 variants included in the package, the other one has larger Tundra tires, so that if you want to use this as a bush aeroplane and land at unprepared strips, you've got a version with much bigger tyres on there. So 3 different variants in the package, but the differences are really just the undercarriage. So basically it is one aeroplane, a Cessna 140, and very nice it is too. Now, the depiction of the Cessna 140 is as an early production variant, and if you're not that too familiar with the Cessna 140 and its production, let's talk a little bit about that. So the first flight of the Cessna 140 was right after the Second World War finished, when Cessna were going to be stopping production of wartime stuff and going back to making civilian aeroplanes, and they'd been planning for this, and so this thing first flew in summer of 1945. The following year, in 1946, it went into production, but it was only produced for about 5 years. They ceased production of it in, I think, 1951. However, in that time, they produced 7,000 of these things because it was incredibly popular. And the reason it was incredibly popular is because it was one of the first GA aeroplanes available with all metal construction, i.e. it wasn't metal tubing covered in canvas, which meant that you didn't periodically have to replace the canvas covering on the thing. It was relatively maintenance free. However, the very, very first versions of the Cessna 140 did have canvas covering on the wings, and that's what's depicted here. You can see those darker patches on the upper surface of the wing. They were the canvas bits on the original production versions. However, as as production progressed, Cessna switched that and used alloy sheeting instead. If you got a late version of the Cessna 140, it didn't have canvas covering; it had aluminium covering on the wings, or if you're an American, aluminum. However, what you find these days is, because there are a lot of these things still about, if you find an early version that would have originally had canvas covering on it, what a lot of owners have done is they've also put alloy sheeting on the wings. So it's quite rare to see one of these with actual canvas covered wings these days. But this is depicted as one with the original canvas covering on the wings. And that is a little bit more apparent when you look at some of the paint jobs where it's got a bare metal fuselage, because it's still got canvas bits on the top of the wings. Now, the other thing that identifies this as an early version of the Cessna 140 is the early versions had these little V struts in between the main struts and the wings. Later versions, the Cessna determined that they didn't really need that additional bracing on there. However, a lot of owners quite like the idea of a little bit more bracing on the struts and what have you. So a lot of owners of Cessna 140s, later production variants, which didn't have those V-struts on them, added them themselves for a bit of extra rigidity. So, if you see those V-struts on things, it doesn't necessarily indicate that it is an early production version, and you can't normally tell by looking at the wings, because a lot of them have alloy cladding on them when they wouldn't originally have had it. So that's about the Cessna 140. The reason that the thing went out of production after only about 5 years is because another aircraft, which is also a review on my channel, the Cessna 170, which subsequently became the Cessna 172, went into production in 1948, and it started sort of like hurting the sales of this thing. So they stopped producing the Cessna 140. However, it didn't completely die, because what they did was they used it as the basis for developing the Cessna 150 and Cessna 152, simply putting a tricycle undercarriage on it and giving it a bit of a rear window plus a slightly squarer tailplane on it. So if this thing looks a little bit familiar, that's because it is the basis of what eventually became the Cessna 152 or the Cessna 150. There you go. Other things that you can spot on different ones over the production lifespan of the Cessna 140 are the later models had slightly different windows, revised window shapes and what have you. So that's another identifier as to whether it's an early or late version. And just as an interesting aside, although you don't get it included in this package, Cessna made a slightly cheaper version of the Cessna 140. And that was the Cessna 120. And the Cessna 120 was a version of the Cessna 140 that did not have those things, didn't have the flaps. It also had slightly cheaper avionics in the cockpit. But a lot of people that bought Cessna 120s upgraded the avionics to the standard of a Cessna 140 anyway, so it was only really the flaps that differentiated between them. But there you go. If you ever wondered what a Cessna 120 was, it's basically a Cessna 140 without flaps and cheaper fittings in the cockpit. So there you go. Anyway, that's all about the real aeroplane. So let's have a look at this thing. So you can see that it is a very, very nice model. And, when you come in close on it, you can see that it stands up to really nice inspection. It's got a lot of very, very good detail on it. For example, if you look at the sort of sprung tail wheel on the thing and stuff like that. That's really good, and the riveting detail is all really nice, and it's got scuffed up paint. And all of the paint jobs on this are PBR, so you know when you get one of them, the metal versions, the bare metal versions, the bare metal looks really, really nice and stuff like that. So it is a very, very nice model. And that continues on the inside as well. So let's take a look at the inside of the thing. So here we go. Now, when you look inside the Cessna 140, you can tell by the way it looks from what year it dates from, because it has a look of a late 40s, early 50s kind of classic car, if you will. This looks very much like the panel on maybe a 55 Chevy or something like that, or what have you. It's got that kind of look about it and what have you. So, you know, it's a very, very nice cockpit. Very sort of stylish and what have you. But it's also very, very functional in the simulator as well. So let's take a look at all that stuff. So the windows open, and they've got very, very nice sounds. And incidentally, when you do open the windows, you can have them open in flight. It doesn't make the airplane overstress and crash, and when you open them, the volume level increases, so you can hear the engine a little bit louder, and you can do that on both sides. So you can do it on there. You can see I've got a little tooltip for that, and what you can also do is you can open the doors on the thing on both sides. So if you want to do that, you can do. So we've got that. Now, in terms of what's in the cockpit and what works, so over on the right hand side there and over on this side here, you've got this, which is a sort of indicator of what angle you're at. So you can see it says no takeoff on there. Early Cessna aeroplanes with tail wheels had that thing on them to sort of assist you a little bit with taking off and what have you. You can see that what we've got up there is we've got pilot lighting like that. I will turn those things on like that, but we'll have a look at what that does when I change this to nighttime, so that you can see what the lighting is like on the thing. Now, in common with most sort of flight simulator airplanes, you can remove the yokes to be able to see things a little bit better. But just before we look at that, we'll have a look at the seating. So we can see the flap lever. There's the seating. There's very nice sort of paneling and padding and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really nicely modeled. One thing that can catch you out here is that when you load this thing up into the sim, the fuel tank will be on none or what have you. It'll be on both off. Yeah, so don't let that catch you out. We've got a little trim wheel there for the elevator, pitch trim, and it has very, very nice sounds on it, like everything else does. So if you have a look at this, you hear that squeaking? So very, very nice sounds on all the controls and stuff like that. Another interesting thing, which you will notice, which some developers don't do, I'm going to release the parking brake, and you'll see that it does affect the rudder pedals on the floor. So when you hit that release parking brake, the rudder pedals do actually move. So that's kind of nice. Now, let's have a look at all of these controls going across here. So not a massively complicated aeroplane because it's from 1946. But what we've got is we've got magneto there, like that. We've got a master ignition switch on there. We've got this thing, which is an old style radio. Now, don't worry about looking at these avionics and thinking, oh, it hasn't got GPS on it. It has it as an option. But we'll get to that in a moment. So let's carry on looking across this. It's tempting to call it a dashboard rather than the panel, because it does look like something from a 50s car. So we've got a turn and slip indicator on there. We've got an airspeed indicator with the red line at 140. You'll probably have to get this in a little bit of a downwards pitch to get it up to 140 knots or miles per hour as it is calibrated on there. We've got a compass, we've got a vertical speed indicator, we've got an altimeter with the calibration knob on there, we've got an engine RPM gauge there, and we've got some sort of vacuum and electrical gauges there. And a clock with a second hand if you want to do sort of timed navigation. Now below that, what we've got is we've got a mixture control, which is uncut, and I don't want it uncut because I'm going to start the thing in a moment or two. And then what we've got is we've got cabin heat. Now the cabin heat it's tempting to think that that's not really going to do much. However, the Cessna 140 is not certified for flight into icing conditions, but Microsoft Flight Simulator can have icing appear on the windscreen. So what you can actually use that cabin heating for is if you turn it up, it will clear mild icing off the windscreen. It won't take it off the wings or anything like that, but it will help to clear the windscreen. So we've got carburetor heat on there as well. Then what we've got is we've got, and you can see there that it is labelled as anti-ice there, but technically it's not anti-ice, it's carburetor heat, which I suppose stops icing in the car, but it's not anti-icing in the sense that it's going to de-ice the wings. Parking brake, cabin heat is for the other side lever if you're flying from the other side, so it doesn't really matter which one you pull, it's going to operate the other one on there. And then what we've got is we've got a starter, which I will use in a moment. We've got this thing here to secure the aircraft. I'll just show you that very, very quickly. If you click secure aircraft and then you look on the external view, what we get is we get tie downs coming off the struts, and we get some chocks in front of the wheels. So, you know, if you like that kind of visual stuff, there you go. Now, the other thing that you've got, controls-wise, is you've got a throttle control there. And obviously, you can use an external hardware throttle if you want to, or you can use this thing here. And slightly difficult to see because they are chrome, so they're kind of reflecting this here. But what you've got is you've got beacon light switch there. You've got a landing light switch there. You've got a navigation light switch there. You've got a strobe light switch there. And you've got a master battery switch there. So if you're having difficulty starting the thing and you don't want to hit Control E, that's a little bit difficult to spot that thing there, the master battery switch. Now, all of this starts lighting up. So now with all of that turned on, what I can do is I can use this radio. So you can see there, tune the transceiver, and we've got inner and outer wheels on there. So on the inner wheel, you can see that I'm changing the decimal points on there. And on the outer wheel, I'm changing the main frequency. This thing doesn't function at all, but when we click on this, it will swap that frequency over there. So you can manually tune things with this old school General Electric radio. However, if you are a child of the magenta line who would like an autopilot and a GPS, you simply press this Avionics master switch. Boom, like that. And then you get this thing, twin 1000 GPSs, Garmin G1000 GPSs. The one on this side, it by default is not turned on. You can press this little switch here to turn it on. I think they've done that so that it's not, you know, affecting the frame rates. And although this thing's actually got pretty good frame rates as it is. So with this thing in here, you have a full autopilot. Now, if you would like to use an autopilot, but you don't want to use that thing, what you can do is you can use sort of like cheaty autopilot by just using the keyboard shortcuts. But if you want to use an external hardware autopilot, and I know this because I've tried it, if you've got something like a Saytech or a Logitech autopilot, that will not be available to you until you turn that on, because I am seeing my Logitech autopilot light up, whereas it doesn't light up when I do that. So clearly that affects the link to an exterior hardware autopilot. But what you've got is you've got a pretty realistic G1000 in there if you want. But if you want to go all old school, you can by doing that. So that's about the size of it in terms of avionics and what have you. But what I did say was I would turn all the lights on, and we've turned on these things here, and then what we'll have a look at is the lighting on the thing. So let's go in there and we'll change that to nighttime, and you can see what those things do. So if I have that one on and then that one off, I can have things a little bit cozier. And if I come up here and turn that off, then I could do is I can use the flashlight in the sim if you'd prefer to do that. And then if we look on the exterior view, we get a landing light, and we get very, very, very bright nav lights and a strobe on the top there. So the night lighting it's simple, but it's good on this thing. But we don't want to do a test flight in in nighttime because you want to check this thing out. So I'm going to put that back on daytime. And we've got live weather at the moment, and it's a bit crappy that. So let's go with clear skies instead, like that. Now back in the cockpit, we should probably turn the strobe light off and probably turn the landing light off. And we'll leave the nav lights on and the beacon light on, but we can turn the other stuff off. So there you go. So now we are good to go. So let's crank this thing up. So I've got that switch on, I've got that master switch on there, so we should just be able to pull the starter and we're in business. I'll just crack the throttle open a little bit, and there we go. Now, I'll put this on the external view so that you can hear the engine. Here we go, back in the cockpit. You can hear that this thing's got pretty nice engine sounds. However, I'm pretty sure you don't want to listen to a review with me shouting over a very loud engine noise. So what I will do is I will go into here, and what I'll do is I'll turn down the sound of the engines. But you can hear that that is a very, very nice engine sound. Allegedly recorded off the real aeroplane. The real engine is, if you're curious, is a Cessna 140, a Continental C85, which, as the name suggests, is 85 horsepower. So not a massively powerful engine on this thing. However, it is only a two-seater, so 85 horsepower will sort of like have the thing going along at about 120 miles an hour, and it'll get the thing up to about 13,000 feet, something like that. Because it is an airplane that dates from 1946, so that's quite good performance for something like that. Now back on the external view, another thing to note is that this thing, rather than having built-in pilots that are specific to the model, what it has is the choice of pilot that you pick in your options in your flight simulator, which I kind of like, because I've picked the pilot that looks most like me, and then I've picked a nice sort of pretty co-pilot. Not every developer does that. Sometimes they'll put some ugly dude in there that you can't get rid of or what have you, or if you are a female flight simmer, it can be a little bit irritating to not be able to have a female pilot. Whereas when developers do this, so you can select your own pilot figure, you are able to have a female pilot. So it's a small point, but I think it's an important one. Particularly if you are a female flight simmer, because why should it always be a bloke in the cockpit? Women can fly too. Anyway, back in the cockpit, so you can hear that this thing has quite a sort of throaty engine noise. I think what I will do is I'll sort of turn it down a little bit more than that, because otherwise you're going to be struggling to hear me. So we'll take the engine down a little bit more, and we'll take the cockpit down a little bit more. There we go, that's a little bit more like it. You can probably hear me more easily. So this thing's a tail dragger, which means that when you're taxiing it, you probably want to get the stick back a little bit. But it does actually taxi kind of nicely. So you get the stick back a little bit, and then you're going to be using the brakes and the rudder pedal or rudder control or whatever to steer the thing. So let's go. So I've released the parking brake, and take that guy's head off. Ooh, just missed him. Now you can see there that now I've turned it so it's getting a little bit of light on the windows. that it does do internal reflections on the window, but they're not annoying, and there is a little bit of scratching depicted on the side windows and the windscreen, but not to the extent where it's kind of obscuring stuff and getting really, really annoying. So I think they've done quite a nice job on the depiction of the cockpit of this thing. It's just a shame that that radio wire that's on the A-pillar doesn't kind of shake around a little bit. I think that'd add quite a lot to it if it did that, but you know, we can't have everything. But it would be nice if it did that. Now, I'm going to keep it on more or less this view when we do the takeoff. Yeah, I'm applying brake there, but I'm keeping the stick back because I don't want this thing to pitch over on its nose. Now, this thing has 3 stages of flaps, but it can get off in quite a short distance. So you know, I guess I wouldn't really need to apply flaps to get this thing out of here, you know, because you can use this as a bush plane if you want to. But let's take off with some flaps like that. Now, what you will see is that I don't need a lot of rudder to keep this thing straight because it isn't a massively powerful engine, 85 horsepower, so there's not a huge amount of torque on the thing. But I'll keep it on this view so that you can see how much rudder I actually do have to apply on this thing. So we're going to go stick back. And we're going to get the power in like that. And I just needed a little touch of rudder to sort of persuade it to keep going straight, and then I can go and get the nose up, or nose down I should say, and I'm having to give it a little bit of left rudder to straighten it up, and then maybe a little bit of right to sort things out, and then it lifts off. So it's not difficult to take off in this thing, and I've got quite a lot of nose up trim there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the flaps up, and then I'm going to trim the nose down a little bit. So you can see that even though this thing's only 85 horsepower, it will climb at, I think you'd be doing well to get more than about 650 feet per minute out of this thing. And obviously that'll slack off a bit when you start getting above 10,000 feet and in thinner air. But it does climb pretty nicely. And I'll just sling it into a turn, and it handles very nicely as well. You can see there, you know, easy to keep the ball centered in a turn. And there we are, coming back with the airfield on the left. So you know, this thing kind of maneuverable. You know, you can do a tight circuit if you want. And quite handy in terms of rate of climb. Now, what I am going to do is, and if you want to see it in the air, here we go. Now that is a lot of nose up trim. So let's trim it down a little bit. Yeah, that's probably a little bit more like it. What I am going to do is I'm going to get this up to a little bit of altitude, so that we can test the stall and spin characteristics of the thing. Now, obviously, if you've got the avionics on the that setting there, you're going to be flying it old school, no autopilot. But if you flick that thing on there, you can quite easily use either the avionics on the G1000 system, or if you've got a hardware exterior autopilot, or you've got keyboard shortcuts assigned to heading and altitude and all that kind of stuff, you can do that. So you've really got the best of both worlds with this thing. You can fly it just so you get old school looks, but sort of modern performance, or you can go completely old school with the thing. And even though it is an old aeroplane and not massively powerful or not massively well endowed in terms of the engine that it's got, with that Continental C85 of 85 horsepower, you can see it's not taking me that long to get up to 2,000 feet. And there we go. So I'll just keep an eye on where I'm going. I'm kind of steering alongside the river, heading towards Manchester. There we go. So I'm going to do something which would probably be illegal in real life, but since we're in a flight simulator, we're not going to worry about that too much. And that is, I'm going to get this thing to stall and spin just to see what it handles like. So what we'll do is we'll pitch the nose up quite a lot until we start losing airspeed, and then what I'll do is I'll give it a boot full of rudder when we hit the stall speed. So I'm really abusing the hell out of this. And it will kind of start going into a spin, but not very viciously. So it does sort of like have the makings of a spin, but it's not terribly vicious. I'll do that without any rudder at all. And you can see that it is now going into a spin, but it sort of recovers itself a little bit. So yeah, it'll drop and then potentially it can go into a spin. So yes, it can do a spin, and yes, it can do a fairly realistic stall, but it's not particularly vicious to handle. So, you know, because it was used as a training airplane. Anyway, let's go and find the airfield. See where we are. There we go. There's the airfield up ahead. Now, the other thing that you'd be interested in this thing is whether it will do a decent side slip. Because, you know, if you want to use this as a bush aeroplane, you probably want to side slip into small airfields. So let's see if this thing will do a side slip. So we'll get the throttle back, we'll pitch it down a little bit, and then we'll give it crossed controls. And the answer is yes, it will. It's not dropping like a stone. Yeah, let's see if see what it does. Well, I'll get it straightened up and then we'll give it full flaps and we'll try that again. There we go. Now with the drag of a lot of flaps out and cross controls, it is losing quite a lot of altitude quickly when it side slips. So yes, you can side slip this thing down and get into small spaces and stuff like that. So quite nice that. We'll go on the external view there. You can see I'm merrily side slipping down. Anyway, we don't want to land in that field. We want to land on the airfield. So let's give it some power. Come out of the side slip, and let's just check the airspeed. And then we'll bring this thing in for a landing. Because the other thing, of course, about this is that it's a tail dragger. So you are either going to be wanting to either do a wheeler landing or a three-pointer in this thing. Yeah. Let's come back on the power a little bit. And we'll just have a look on the external view because the airfield will be there that I'm going to be turning around for. I'm not going for a sort of mega accurate circuit on this, but there you go. You can see this gets very, very nice frame rate, so it looks good in the air and what have you. And we'll punch those flaps in again, and then what we'll do is we'll bring it in for a landing. So you can see the reflection on the windscreen isn't, you know, it's enough to be convincing without being obtrusive. So that's kind of nice. So coming completely off on the power. And we're coming pretty steep because I've got full flaps on. So that's going to brake us quite a bit. You know, it's quite a high approach speed that I'm on here, but you know, I'm sort of going to stretch the landing so that we haven't got a long taxi in. So I'm holding this thing off. And there you go. Relatively easy to get it down to a three-pointer. So even though it is a tail dragger, it's not massively hard to land. As is the case with the real thing, because it was designed to be, you know, a nice aeroplane that could serve as a trainer. You know, so they weren't trying to design something that flew like a death trap. If you get the stick back, you can apply brakes and bring this thing to a halt pretty quickly, and it doesn't, like a lot of add-on aeroplanes, it doesn't sort of want to tip over on its nose too easily. So, you know, you can actually use the brakes on this to bring it to a halt. So the other thing that you're going to be interested in is, you know, if you're going to use this as a bush aeroplane, is it easy to maneuver on the ground? Because you might land it in a small field and then you know, wonder whether you can actually turn the thing around to go and do a takeoff. You can see the visibility out of it is not terrible as long as you are prepared to weave a little bit. And let's see how fast you can turn this thing around. So here we go. Bit of power on the brakes. And you can get this thing around in quite a tight spot. So not terribly difficult to operate. So let's go back in the cockpit and we'll cut the power. There you go. So the prop animation isn't quite realistically allied to the noise of the engine sort of spinning down. You can still hear the crankshaft moving a little bit and the tappets going and stuff like that, but you know, big deal. So really lovely cockpit, and there are variations in the cockpit colours for the different paint jobs and stuff like that. So it isn't just exterior the paint jobs, it's interior as well. So there's quite a few different colours if you don't like this red colour, although I do think that's kind of swanky. Reminds me of a 57 Chevy or something like that. It's kind of cool. But not a difficult aeroplane to fly. Nice to land, you know. And if you're into tail draggers and vintage aeroplanes that have got a little bit of capability, because you know it'll follow a magenta line and stuff like that, but can also go old school. If you want them to, then this is kind of cool. So quite a nice first offering from Aeroplane Heaven. That's the Cessna. Excuse me, the Cessna 140. And very cool it is too. And you can even have it with, you know, just one yoke showing, and you know, that looks kind of cool as well. Anyway, that's about it for Aeroplane Heaven's Cessna 140 for this quick shot review. However, released almost at the same time and also available as a review on this channel is Carinado's Cessna 170. Which is sort of broadly similar to this. More about that if you watch that review. So, you know, if you're considering this thing, have a look at that other review as well, because that one's cheaper, but, you know, although it's cheaper, is it better? You know, so I would recommend watching both of the reviews. And on the subject of this, if you like the reviews on this channel, you know, and you like the information that you get out of them, then consider hitting that subscribe button, because if you do that, one, I like to have subscribers, and I like you sort of chatting in the comments and stuff like that. But two, if you are subscribed, you get a notification whenever I upload a new video, and I've got loads of really cool ones coming up, including some real world aviation if you're into stuff like that, because I'm back working now. We're coming out of the COVID zombie apocalypse. I'm back working at Manchester Airport, and I'm going to be doing some videos from there about sort of real world aviation on airliners and stuff like that. So that's coming up, and that's going to be kind of cool. So if you like all that stuff and you like these reviews, hit that subscribe button, because I'd love to have you as a subscriber on my channel. Anyway, that's enough of plugging the channel. That's it for this episode of Jock's Hangar for the Aeroplane Heaven Cessna 140. Look out for the Carinado Cessna 170 review as well. That's it. Bye!